Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. It looks like we still have a few people joining us, so we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. Hello, everybody. My name is Alex Vasquez, and I am the Solutions Architect for our security practice at Accudata Systems. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome to our webinar, The Next Frontier in Insider Threat Data Protection. Today's presentation is the first webinar in our three-part threat defense webinar series with Forcepoint. The goal of this series is to arm you with knowledge and best practices to take your threat defense strategy to the next level. More specifically, we'll focus on the insider threat as well as cloud and network security to hopefully give you a wide breadth of context as you refine your security infrastructure. So Accudata has been on the forefront of technology innovation since we were founded in 1982. Since that time, we've invested heavily in emerging technologies that we see as transformative to our customers' way of doing business. Over the past 30 years, we've really built a team of highly skilled local consultants who partner with our clients to improve their business through IT. For nearly 2 decades, we've invested heavily in our cybersecurity expertise and today lead the market as a top advisor on cyber threat prevention, detection, and remediation. One of the ways we've been able to grow that expertise is through our partners like Forcepoint, who stay on the leading edge and equip our clients with the tools they need to protect their business. So at this time, I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Robert Slocum, Director of Data, Security, and Insider Threat Strategies. So Robert has spent more than 18 years in the technology industry, specializing in data theft prevention and endpoint security. During the presentation, feel free to submit questions in your Q&A panel. During the last 15 minutes of today's webinar, we will give Robert the opportunity to answer your questions live. So without further delay, again, I want to thank you for your time and introduce Robert Slocum to present Insider Threats Data Protection presentation.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you all for joining today. Today we're going to talk about how Forcepoint, how we're linking data movement with human behavior to kind of create this complete data protection. Things that I would really emphasize here too is we're not taking two products, sticking them together and making it the one-stop shop, if you would. We're taking the industry leader in insider threat protection and a Gartner Magic Quadrant leader in DLP since 2008 and really creating a new market and a very unique use for these. If you want to ask what do we do for our customers, there's really 4 use cases that we solve for. And many of the customers that we deal with will have multiple use cases they're trying to solve for. First and foremost is the business enablement. This is enabling people to go to the cloud, go to Office 365, use sharing services like Box Enterprise or Citrix ShareFile, as well as enabling the roaming user. The users today are on and off the corporate network. They're containing sensitive data on Mac and Windows devices. Being able to identify, discover, and protect that data wherever it resides. It's enabling business. Protecting reputation, this is best seen when we look at a company, for example, a medical device manufacturer, for example. If you look at somebody, say a pacemaker manufacturer, if they were to have a breach today, even if that breach was to occur in their HR or their payroll, the front page of the paper tomorrow, CNN tonight, is going to run the headline, pacemaker manufacturer gets hacked, millions impacted and at risk. So their biggest fear isn't necessarily the PR or regulatory fines that may come out of a breach, as much as it is the damage to the reputation. Another good example, if you think of these small credit unions, a large bank has the money and the resources to absorb a breach. But if you take your small local branch, localized credit union, if they have a breach and lose customer trust, that could end up putting them out of business. Regulatory compliance is really pretty self-explanatory. And we're going to spend majority of today talking on the fourth one, which is securing intellectual property. And we're really securing intellectual property from one of three sources. Obviously, you have the malicious outsider. That's the sexy conversation. That's what's getting the front page of the paper. But more and more, we have this rise in insider threats. And that is from malicious insiders, or the employee that goes rogue, and accidental or broken business processes. An example of an accidental loss, I would consider it an accidental or really a broken business process, is we had a customer. It was in a large tri-state area, large city area. They had a hospital that was connected to a university. One of the ER surgeons was performing surgeries by day, would load up the medical records up into Dropbox, and then in the evening go into the university as an adjunct professor in the medical school. He was actually using the live patient records of what he was treating during the day. Now, there was nothing malicious here, no malicious intent whatsoever. Even to this day, that doctor sees nothing wrong with what he's doing. His take on it was, how could this be bad? I'm taking real-life patient data of what I see every day in the emergency room, and I'm teaching tomorrow's doctors using real-live data. Well, despite the fact that it violates many laws, is a major HIPAA violation, beyond that, really there's no malicious intent. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we combat the insider, both malicious and accidental. Now, first and foremost, when we look at insider threat, the stats that kind of jump out here is 88%, this is actually a Ponyman study, and 88% of the respondents felt that insider threat is a concern. And obviously, you wouldn't be on the call if we didn't recognize this. This is a real life issue. Down three numbers down to 56%. Many IT admins feel there's just way too many alerts. And we're going to talk about how we combat that. If you think about any infrastructure, typically it's not uncommon for us to be running anywhere from 15 upwards of 25 different point solutions. There are different consoles to manage, generating tons of alerts, hundreds to thousands to even tens of thousands of alerts every day. So for the IT admin or security analyst that's coming in and looking at these thousands and thousands of alerts, is how are they accomplishing anything? How are they getting this feeling of accomplishment? And we're going to kind of highlight how we're able to do that in a live demo in a couple of minutes. Now, the other thing is visibility. If you look at visibility, 16% of the respondents felt they had enough visibility into the data to protect themselves from insider threats. So that puts you at about 84% that felt they did not. Now, visibility really is at the crux of the issue here. And if you think of as we went from the industrial age, where we had catwalks and you had supervisors who would walk around the manufacturing floor looking down, they had eyes on the employees. They could see if somebody was sabotaging the system, if they were stealing something. But as we've kind of migrated to the digital age, that has come at the cost of visibility, with data all over the place, from cloud services to roaming endpoint users. Today we're going to talk about how we restore that visibility. And I think the best way to illustrate this is to really bring this to life using an actual real-world use case. In this case, what we had was a US-based company after recent M&A activities decided to reduce their workforce. It was a software company. Impacted in here were the actual software engineers. So they brought them in a room, they sat them down, they explained to them many of them would be retained for 4 to 6 months. They were taking good care of them post that 4 to 6 months time. They'd each be getting a 12-month severance package as part of the severance package. Part of the packages all the employees signed basically said, don't steal our stuff. Don't take our assets, don't steal our intellectual property. Well, alarmingly, a large number of the engineers went right back to their desk, and this is exactly what they did. They tried saving IP to USB mass storage devices, thumb drives. Another batch tried sending them to things like Dropbox or other cloud services. So while this was going on, what we see here is the SureView Insider Threat Command Center. What this does, so let's say Jack, our security analyst, this is what Jack is actually watching. And what you see here on the top left-hand side of the page is the daily risk for the last 30 days. And as expected, you see a little spike here towards the end of that, which perhaps that's rumors of upcoming layoffs. On the top right-hand side, that's my daily risk score of each individual employee. I could simply mouse over that. It will expand and give me more information. Now, a security analyst, Jack in this case, majority of his time is going to be spent on watching what's the rest of this page. And what we see here, it's actually cutting off the bottom 6, but this is identifying, using behavior analytics, is identifying who are the 12 biggest risk employees based on their behaviors. So when we talk about alerts, we see we very quickly are getting rid of the noise and identifying these are my riskiest users that I need to put eyes on. And in this case, you see like on the top here, Betty Barnes, it's a score 1 to 10. She's rating about a 6.8. And below her, you can see kind of a ticker of what is she doing that's put her in this high-risk user group. Now, in this case, our security analyst wasn't drawn to one of the top 2 or 3. It was actually the bottom left of the screen. You see Philip Mitchell. The reason being is Philip Mitchell is actually the director of engineering, making him a super user. So by simply clicking on Philip Mitchell, I'm able to sit here and I'm able to pull up a screen. I see here what his daily risk score is, and over on the right-hand side, I have a minute-by-minute ticker running of what is he doing that's put him on that group. The first thing I see here, which I've already expanded, is he's made 3 attempts to disable the insider threat agent that resides on his laptop. Now, I'll note, if you notice, it is a green. For most customers, that would actually be a red circle, not a green circle. The reason it's green here is because of his role as Director of Engineering, they do not activate that policy, but SureView Insider Threat is still triggering this as risky behavior. So he's still showing up, it's still putting him on there, even though it's not necessarily a policy violation. A little bit further down, we see he's now copied a file off a shared drive, and we see he's tried to send it out. Again, I mouse over, I click on it, and I can expand, and I can quickly see that what it is, he's gone to a share file, he saved source code locally to his hard drive as a PDF, and I can see he's now tried to exfiltrate it to a USB mass storage device through the M drive. Now, a little bit further down, the next thing that he tries to do is he actually tries to send an email out, and then further down he tries to send it out through the web channel. Once again, very simply click on it, it will expand it, and I'm able to see what he's actually doing. He's trying to send it to a Yahoo account, then he's trying to send it out to a cloud service app similar to like a Dropbox. So just to pause here for now. This is one of the most dangerous adversaries any of us will ever face. He's an insider, highly intelligent. The first thing he tries to do is disable the insider threat agent 3 separate times. The next thing he's doing now is trying to exfiltrate through various means of the data. Not to mention he's a super user, so he has the keys to our kingdom. One question that I do often get here, you see how simple it was. We've eliminated a lot of the alert noise or a lot of the chatter here by identifying who are my 12 riskiest users. Number 2, I'm able to click and drill down. I'll get asked often, how many people do I need to run this? First of all, you notice you didn't need a specialist. I didn't have to go get somebody and hire somebody. We know that there is a massive shortage of skilled IT professionals. PricewaterhouseCoopers has done a study, and it's projected to be a global issue of about 4.25 million shortage of skilled IT professionals by the end of 2017. One of the things, I do travel globally, and I always like to ask our customers or prospects that I speak with, and partners, have you tried to hire any skilled IT professionals? And overwhelmingly, anybody who's been out in the last year trying to hire anybody knows there is this shortage. The backside of that is, if you think it takes about 10 to 11 years to build up that skill set, to really have the skill to be here, this isn't a problem going away anytime soon. So first and foremost, this is a tool. It's not uncommon for many of our commercial customers to use 30, 40, 50% of one person's time to monitor and to watch. Other organizations where they want to watch everything, you may go as high as 50 people watching. Federal government, for example, they might run 50 people watching because they're going to watch everything. So it really depends on how much you want to watch. But I would say for a lot of our commercial users, you're looking at 30, 40, 50% of one person's time. So coming back to our case study, if you remember in the very beginning, I said they announced the layoffs, people signed these severance packages, and alarmingly, a large number of the engineers went right back to their desk and tried saving and taking some of the intellectual property. What ended up happening here is those engineers were actually terminated. Their severance packages were pulled. That in itself actually paid for the SureView insider threat for the first year. It was a U.S.-based company. They actually turned around and had sued. It is really hard to dispute intent when you have record and replay capability that captures keystrokes as well as screenshots. So when I have screenshots of somebody going into the log files, trying to delete the logs of them saving or attempting to save out the IP out through the USB thumb drives or to Dropbox, it's really hard to dispute intent when you're going into the logs and trying to delete it. That was actually, there is a chain of custody. So we give you an over-the-shoulder view with playback that gives you near real-time playback. We've run a demo and run this through in a scenario where you actually have an employee who takes a job at a competitor and based on their behaviors show up in the risky user and pulling up the record and replay, you're able to see that the employee is actually in the midst, and it's near real time, having a chat with what appears to be a hiring manager. They have Google Documents open on their screen with new hire information and forms from the new company, is having an active chat and is in a share file trying to exfiltrate files. And again, where that over-the-shoulder view, there is a chain of custody. It is admissible in a court of law. So I'm going to pause for 1 second here. Now, the one thing that I like to ask, if we had this as an open mic right now, is, has the data been exfiltrated? And the answer is, we don't know. I would make an assumption that it wasn't, because here Philip Mitchell, the director of engineering, tries to exfiltrate the file first through a USB, then he tries to send it out to a Yahoo account, then he tries to send it out to via the web channel to a cloud service. So based on the facts that he's making multiple attempts, I'm assuming it's being blocked. SureView Insider Threat does not block the exfiltration of files. This is giving me eyes-on, early indication of a potential risk before it happens. It is a DLP solution in the back end that's actually physically stopping the exfiltration. So here in this case, Triton AP data is blocking first the attempt to save it to a USB. Next, it's blocking, here you can see it's blocking the actual email and then the actual web. The one thing I would point out here, if you look in the middle of the page, you see the highlighted, really dead smack center of the screen. That is the actual physical attachment that the employee is trying to exfiltrate out, that is being blocked by the Triton AP Data DLP solution. And as the admin, I can click on it, open it in a browser. Here I see it's a PDF. I can open it up and see what it is, or I could save it later, save it for later use. In this case, again, the interesting thing, you had a highly intelligent super user, director of engineering, The next step he actually does after doing everything was he then tries using custom encryption, which our DLP solution is able to detect and block that exfiltration as well. Now, one of the things that come up is privacy. There's a couple of things to highlight with this. Number one, especially privacy if you have an office in the UK or an area like the EU where privacy laws are very strict. First and foremost, this also helps to exonerate employees. If we were to go and take a look at Sony, for example, when that Sony breach occurred, the original reports coming out of Sony was it had a rogue admin. It was later determined, no, the admin had been impacted by a phishing attack, and a malicious outsider has then become an insider. So if I'm a hacker and I get your credentials, I now become an insider with your credentials. So there are many times where this is actually used and can be used to exonerate employees. The SureView Insider threat will only collect the information that, first and foremost, that you put it in. Now, keep in mind, when we look at the privacy law and how privacy laws work, the way they work is, in the UK, it's typically a 2-tier. In Germany, I find Germany's probably the strictest with their privacy laws. It's actually a 3-tier system. And the way it works is if I'm a security analyst, I may see something that deem may be a threat, but I don't have any identifiable information on that employee. So I'm able to escalate it to a tier 1 who sees a little bit more of the information. They deem, yes, it definitely is a risk, but yet they still don't see any identifiable information, and they can escalate this up now to a tier 3. So in our SureView Insider threat, first and foremost, it's only collecting the data that you tell it to collect. Second of all, on the DLP side, you have the ability to fully anonymize the data. So in Germany here, you're able to anonymize it so each tier is limited to what they can see based by their role. In the UK, by the way, it's usually a 2-tier. So analyst sees something, he escalates it directly to the privacy officer. Another interesting thing, if you look and actually read in the privacy law, it is vague in a couple of areas. They do not necessarily have the term probable cause, but there is the probable cause of protecting your information. So the caveat here is to be upfront. Being upfront where they know that this is being used, that there is an insider threat securing our intellectual property. Now, the probable cause comes into play is that you're using software and using analytics based on the individual's behavior that puts them into the riskiest user group to begin with. So there's your probable cause based on the actions. Now, does a company have a right to protect the information? So this is absolutely solutions that do work, that can work in privacy areas such as the EU. Now, going back to the case study that I was talking about, in this case, this did not happen, but we know Philip Mitchell, the director of engineering, was highly intelligent. What if he had saved that share file locally on his drive, and rather than trying to exfiltrate the file out via web, email, USB, what if he had taken his laptop and simply gone home? What if he had gone to his house using his home network completely off the corporate network? With Triton AP Endpoint, we're able to discover, and we could see even just a fragment or a partial fingerprint of structured or unstructured data on a Mac or Windows endpoint device. We're actually, when you look at the Mac OS X agent, we're actually the only one in the industry, we've been doing it for about 5 years, that can do full discovery and remediation of Mac OS agents. So in this case, even had he gone home, we would have been able to not only detect, but also block the exfiltration of the file while off the corporate network. The points I like to emphasize here is, you have SureView Insider threat, bringing in the behavior analytics, putting eyes on the user, giving me an early indication of a threat, of a potential insider threat before it leaves. We're not just taking two solutions in an insider threat and a DLP and sticking them together. We're actually taking, I mentioned, best in breed. SureView Insider threat was originally, when it was acquired by Raytheon, they saw the value in it as protecting themselves and their own internal assets. later used by the federal government, and today by a lot of Fortune 500 companies. This is tried and true. This is actually used today to protect some of the most sensitive networks on the planet. The way it does and the way it works with SureView Insider Threat, and when you look at an Insider Threat product, really what you're looking at is the ability to do four things. First, I have to be able to baseline from a user group and an individual. Because what I'm looking for is by creating a baseline, I find what is normal, what is the normal behavior and actions. And when I find abnormal or deviance from normal, that can trigger potential, giving me an early indication of a potential threat way before it ever happens. Now, one question that I do often get is, how long does it take to baseline? And what does that footprint look like? First and foremost, it's going to crawl through the metadata, so it's a very small footprint. And typically, on average, you're looking at about 30 days to baseline, again, work group and individual users. You have to have the ability to correlate systems. And the best example of correlating systems, I don't know if any of you out there heard or have read the article, the cat video. But bottom line is they were not using an Insider Threat product, nor were they using, obviously, SureView Insider Threat, but they were not a SureView or, as far as I'm aware of, using an Insider Threat product. Now, what happened here is, and a very exciting thing happened for me. I was presenting in Denver, Colorado back in October, and as I started presenting this story, one of the gentlemen in the audience jumped up and yelled out, "I was a security analyst at the company," blurted out the name of the company. "I was the one who discovered this." So I brought him up on stage, and it was great because I got real life, the feedback from him of what happened. But bottom line was, you had an employee who one day had badged in the Baltimore office, and they noticed that he had logged in from an IP address in China. So over the next few weeks, they started kind of an investigation, and what they discovered was you had an employee who was the #1 software programmer, #1 engineer, got every accolade, every promotion, every pay raise. When they started looking and kind of say, hey, what is he doing? He was coming in the office, he'd go to Reddit, he'd do eBay, jump on a couple of other websites, take a 2-hour lunch. He would then come up and spend his entire afternoon watching or uploading cat videos. Then he would, at the end of the day, he would type up a report, this is what I did, this is what I was working on programming, here are the bugs, here are the fixes that I did, and he'd submit it. And again, absolute rock star inside of the organization. The problem is the actions do not jive with the work and what's going on here. So turns out what had happened was at the very end they discovered the PDF that was the telltale. What he had done was he had actually outsourced his job to a firm in China. He was paying less than 10% of his salary to this firm. He actually took the physical RSA token, stuck it in a FedEx envelope, and mailed it to the firm in China, so they'd have access to do the programming. So he was doing no work, but that had gone on for over 3 years. Now, had they been running a SureView Insider Threat, we would have been able to correlate systems. So that second that we saw a login from a badge address, as well as an IP address from China, that doesn't correlate. Now we could have jumped in and pulled up Concur, or a travel tool. We use Concur, for example. I could pull up Concur and see, okay, what is the travel? What is this person doing? Is he in China? Has he ever been in China? In this case, the answer was no. I can start correlating HR tools. I can start bringing things together and building my case of what is going on here. Quicker investigation, quicker to stop. The Command Control Center I've already showed and kind of demoed. This gives me, again, eliminating a lot of the alert noise by bringing up what are my 12 greatest and riskiest users. And we also talked about the video record and playback. The thing that the video is actually recording the screenshots. It's not a video per se. It is a video of screenshots. So if you had video, obviously there would be a very large data need. So it's not large. It actually resides as an agent on the endpoint device. It gets pulled into the Command Control Center, thus recorded, saved for later use. Helps with attribution. Now, when we look at the DLP, again, we're taking a market leader in SureView Insider Threat. We're also taking an industry leader, Gartner Magic Quadrant leader since 2008 in the DLP space. And one of the things that I encourage customers that have a Gartner relationship, call Brian Reed. Call Brian Reed. He's the security analyst at Gartner who evaluates, does the Magic Quadrant, and inquire about Forcepoint. Because I'm confident what he'll tell you, we have always been an innovator in technology. We talked about fingerprinting and our Mac OS agent being able to detect even just a partial or a fragment of structured or unstructured data on or off the corporate network. We've got the advanced technologies. DLP is not an easy solution to deploy, but I do feel that Forcepoint makes it easier than anybody else. With a extensive library of policies and a very user-friendly wizard, I'm simply selecting my geographical location, my industry. So I'm in Texas, I'm in the United States, I'm in Texas, I'm in healthcare, and in a single template, it's pulling up the most common intellectual property to secure, as well as the common regulatory compliance to meet. Advanced technologies, for example, I saw a couple of healthcare customers out there on this call, but if you look at text hidden within an image, having the ability with optical character recognition to see the text hidden within an image, such as an MRI or scanned data or JPEGs, etc., and being able to stop the exfiltration of data. And DRIP DLP was something actually originally formed for a bank. More recently, this is where you take a look at what appears to be a small incident. In this case, it was a bank teller stealing 1, 2, or 3 credit cards at a time. And it looks at a wider time frame. So it determines whether this is a 1 credit card coming out or is this 1 credit card coming out every 15 minutes. A good example more recently that I saw of this was a admin who in healthcare, knowing that in the United States, HIPAA, if I have 500 records or more impacted in a breach, it's considered a HIPAA violation. Knowing that the company had set the parameters that anytime a file with 499 medical records or more in it, to block it. So the admin was taking 490 at a time. So with DRIP DLP, you get a wider view on there. The other thing is, when you look at the evolution of DLP, right? DLP started in 2003. In the 2005-06 timeframe, there was a company called Port Authority that was having a lot of success, that built their products not just for regulatory compliance, but they also built it with the idea of, well, let's build this with the engine to protect against intellectual property as well. And that actually caught a lot of traction. In 2007, we acquired them. That is our DLP solution today. And it was probably about the 2011-2012 timeframe where you really started seeing other vendors out there popping out as an afterthought, saying, yeah, we do intellectual property too. But we're talking about a platform that was engineered, designed from the beginning to protect both intellectual property as well as the regulatory compliance data. And one of the things we did about 2 years ago was started with the user behavior, the insider threat. It originally in the DLP was a very static. It was policy driven that would generate reports, and the plan was to build out the analytics side. Along came Raytheon, the acquisition and the formation of the joint venture known as Forcepoint today. And their SureView Insider Threat, as I demoed, kind of really took it to the whole next level. So that's where you see today, definitely have always been an innovator in technology, but here we're the only DLP today that actually talks to the insider threat. So a DLP incident today will actually communicate the insider threat, can pull that employee into the riskiest users. So you see, even though they are 2 separate products, you see the solution together working as one. So again, the point of emphasis that I would have before I open it up for question is, what we're doing is we're taking the ability to link data movement with the user behavior, bringing in analytics to give me an early indication of a potential risk and threat from a deviation from what is normal behavior, as well as linking it with and preventing the exfiltration of whether it's regulated data or IP. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it back to Alex, and we'll open it up for some questions.
Thank you, Robert. At this time, we will begin our Q&A session with Robert Slocum. During the webinar, we received a number of questions, but we may have time to take more. Feel free to submit additional questions as the discussion continues. Okay, so I have a question here for you, Robert, and it is, what is the fastest way to reach risk mitigation with DLP versus just finding data that still requires cleanup?
So first and foremost, when you look at data, one of the things that again I didn't get into, I didn't want to make this too product-y of a conversation for this webcast, but you have to be contextually aware of data, and by understanding the who, what, where, when data is, like who's using it, where is it going, and having that awareness and being able to dictate. So first and foremost is having a complete DLP, an enterprise class DLP that's able to discover where your critical data is and being able to remediate. That's first and foremost. So, one of the things that this kind of gets into, if you look at Gartner, you look at Forrester, a lot of the analysts will say is, do I need to go out and find where all my data is and fingerprint everything and machine learn it? No. At the end of the day, what I need to do is I need to find what is my most critical data, what are the keys to the kingdom. So starting at intellectual property, obviously regulatory data, then having a solution that spans, whether that's data in motion, data in use, or data at rest, and being able to secure across the various channels. So for our customers, what I find is, with, let's say, your web or an email customer, Triton AP email customer, which comes with the DLP module, protecting the email. If I'm a web, there's the DLP module. These are ways that I'm able to start securing the exfiltration of data immediately. Those reports and policies from what Gartner calls the integrated channels like email and web, the policies and reports that I generate over there carry over into the enterprise when I'm ready to scale them. So number one is understanding where my data is by having a contextually aware solution that focuses on that data. That's the first and foremost. Number two is having one that spans all three of those channels, whether data's in the cloud or on an endpoint device. For example, if I save a document on my laptop today and I'm running Triton AP endpoint and I go home, it doesn't matter. That policy will still detect it on my laptop, even if I don't know, or the company as a whole doesn't know that document resides. So it's not necessarily the finding the data, but having the controls in place to prevent the exfiltration of the sensitive data.
Excellent. Thank you, Robert. All right, next question here. How do you complete large-scale discovery and cleanup for specific data within Microsoft Exchange? Things like PCI data, PHI data, anything of that nature?
Yeah, and I think that kind of ties in with the first question a little bit, right? So the first thing is preventing the exfiltration of it. So whether it's MS Exchange or what we're even seeing a large movement to is Office 365, right? So whether it's Exchange or Exchange Online, it's having the ability, first and foremost, to discover what's out there and prevent the exfiltration. So whether that's in an Exchange environment or an Exchange Online environment, it's having the ability to block the exfiltration of it. So as far as the discovery, again, it comes to this point. If I'm on my laptop and I'm running a DLP solution that prevents the exfiltration when I'm off the corporate network, then it doesn't matter if I know, and I'm not saying, I don't want to be misunderstood, I'm not saying it's not important to have discovery and know where your data is, because that's the first step, right, of protecting it. But at the end of the day, I can have the control in place preventing the exfiltration of PHI or PCI without knowing that it was on my laptop. Then during the discover where the data is and apply the policies and remediation accordingly.
Okay, great. Thank you, Robert. Next question here. What can a company do if an insider does compromise my network?
That's one of the great things I really like on this, and what really drew me in when first time I ever saw SureView Insider Threat, is it does a couple of things. First and foremost, there has to be an attribution. And I get asked this a lot. How do I know if this was malicious or benign? So part of, you obviously want to assess what happened, where it went. Was this a malicious rogue employee? Let's say I didn't get a promotion, I didn't get a pay raise, but I want to be able to identify first and foremost, or is that a compromised system? And when I'm able to see record, like the screenshot records, that will be very telling, right? If I see actions being done and data being sent out, yet or attempted to be sent out, then I'm hoping that, when I open up the screenshots, if I don't see screenshots of somebody doing that, now I have an infected laptop. That's happening in the background. So there are things that I can do, but I think the very first step here is to take a step back and make sure I have a control in place to prevent the exfiltration of data. Now, when I look at SureView Insider Threat and I look at a DLP solution, in a perfect world, I like to look at this as a customer roadmap when I talk with customers. Here we are today at A. We want to get to point Z. What are the steps to get there? Now, we'll have customers that have 2 or 3 people, let's say a hedge fund. Anybody that's heavy in IP, so for example, they're big on this insider threat product. So the first step is if I'm a hedge fund and I have unlimited funds, then it's great. I can go buy both solutions. I deploy it. Everything's great. But if I'm at point A today and I want my security roadmap to get me to point Z, the first thing I want to do is put in place a way to prevent the exfiltration. And that's one thing I hope I demonstrated in that use case was that it's the DLP that's preventing the exfiltration of the data. The insider threat is giving me the eyes on the user. So first and foremost, building a roadmap, having a DLP in place. Step 2 is now putting early indication, eyes on the user, and protecting the insider through the insider threat. So I kind of see my roadmap here. So obviously, I could spend the whole webcast answering this question, but if I know somebody's been inside, if they're an insider threat user, I can tell you what my next steps are. What I'm going to do is, number 1, hopefully I've had something to prevent. I got to see what data got out. Number 2, I saw several healthcare customers on there. Anybody that's in a regulated industry, I have to see what laws were violated. What potential compliance violations do I have now? And that's where I engage the plan. But from an insider threat, what the security analyst is going to start doing is pull up the screenshots, start seeing the screenshots of what's going on, the keystrokes, identify malicious or benign. They're going to pull and save that if there's attribution later, if it is a malicious employee, and there may be legal action later against them. So that's the thing, is start the investigation. But I have the tools we kind of saw where I'm able to pull up and start seeing, is this malicious or benign?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Robert. Next question. How do I bring up an insider threat to my employees without sounding like I am accusing them of treason?
I love that question, especially because we hit on a little bit earlier the privacy. So when we talk about the, first and foremost, Target, Sony, and Ashley Madison kind of changed the landscape here in the United States because all 3 CEOs got fired or left post-breach. What we're finding now is the days of, we used to hear this a lot 3 years ago, 2 years ago even. We trust our employees, they wouldn't steal from us. Well, now with CEOs getting fired, you're seeing board members being held accountable. They're now coming to the CISOs, to the IT directors that were beating the drum saying, we need this, we need that. So number 1 is, I see, especially in areas where you have privacy laws, be upfront. This helps exonerate employees. At the end of the day, you're a business protecting your intellectual property. There is critical data that you're trying to protect, which is why you're running an insider threat product. Many times, just like in the DLP, when you put on DLP and you turn on reporting, it kind of notifies employees and they see, for example, I know it's more on the web side, but here, At my company, if I go to a website, it will flag me. It's at employee education and say, hey, this is a shopping website. Are you sure you want to go here? Is this really business related? And I have to make that. So when you start seeing a dramatic drop in all the risk. But being upfront, explaining to that employee, hey, we're securing intellectual property, and this also helps us to exonerate employees. When your credentials or if your credentials get stolen, this helps us to prevent you from being, this helps exonerate you. For example, I kind of touched on that with Sony.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Robert. One more question. Is there or are there training or awareness programs I can deploy to mitigate an insider threat?
I touched on that a little bit. I think there is always education that we need to do. I've been very fortunate in my career. I've worked for two companies. I've worked for, Forcepoint being one of them, have an incredibly strong training department. But employee education, again, I use that web example where we pop up. But on an insider threat, again, what is it? Is it a malicious insider? So then it's education on phishing, education on not clicking on links, right? There's still a huge issue with people clicking on links. And how many phishing attacks I forward to you, Alex, and then Alex clicks on it. And then Alex forwards it to two other employees, and they click on it. So we get this domino effect. So anything that we do from an education standpoint, is incredibly helpful. One thing I think that we do here that's really, really neat, and I still think phishing is definitely a worthy topic. It's a very, very, very serious issue that we all face. Is we do here at Forcepoint what we call catch of the day. Is you can send to our labs every day as employees. We'll send in, here's what I think is a phishing scam or attack, and they'll run it through and they'll test it. And at the end of every quarter, we have all hands-on meetings, and we give awards to whoever found the best catch of the day. So it's using fun ways to educate the employees of actions like clicking on a link that they probably shouldn't be clicking on, or things that open up the risk. And remember, when a malicious outsider gets your credentials, say through a phishing attack, they now become a malicious insider.
Great. Thank you so much, Robert, and we appreciate your time today. That basically concludes all the time we have for questions. So to all the attendees, if you are interested in learning more about how to utilize Forcepoint and insider threats data protection as part of your security strategy, please reach out to your local Accudata account manager, and we can arrange a meeting with one of our solutions architects, such as myself, to dive deeper into developing a solution or solutions tailored to meet your business and IT requirements. And as noted in our invitation, we are giving away a $100 American Express gift card to an attendee. The winner of the gift card will be announced via a post-webinar email, which will go out tomorrow morning. With that being said, that concludes our webinar, and thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.